He didn't blink when the judge said the words. He just stared forward, locked, frozen, like a man watching his own legacy crumble in real time. The courtroom was ice cold, and so was he. YNW Melly didn't cry. He didn't flinch, but something behind his eyes shattered. You could feel it. You could see it. The boy who once smiled through mugshots was now face to face with the moment he swore would never come. The sentencing didn't feel real. Not to his fans, not to his family, and not to the millions who had ridden the highs and lows of his case for years. He had become more than a rapper. He was a mystery, a movement, a meme, a martyr depending on who you asked. But when the gavel came down, the illusion cracked. This wasn't about lyrics anymore. This was about life. And for YNW Melly, that life just got taken. He sat still as his name echoed through the courtroom. Again and again, like it didn't belong to him anymore. The man once known for flipping personalities in a single verse, Melly versus Melvin, was suddenly just another inmate. No performance, no smoke, no defense left to give, just silence, final, heavy. And that's when fans outside the courthouse started chanting, tears running down faces, holding signs that said "Free Melly," while knowing in their hearts that this time, there was no getting out. But what the world didn't know, what was never shown in headlines or courtroom live streams, was the final decision wasn't just about evidence. It was about fear, reputation, image, and the deal no one ever expected Melly to take. Because something went down behind closed doors just days before his sentencing, something that could have saved him, but Melly said no. And that refusal, it cost him everything, before the mugshots, before the double murder headlines, before the trial that turned into a spectacle. There was just Jamal Demons, a skinny kid growing up in Gifford, Florida, with a face full of innocence and a heart full of rage. He didn't choose chaos, it found him. Melly's childhood wasn't tragic in the way documentaries like to frame stories. It was more complicated than that. He wasn't poor in money, he was poor in safety, in stability, in peace. He used to walk to school past crime scenes. Yellow tape became background noise. Helicopters weren't emergencies, they were nightly interruptions. He grew up knowing that tomorrow wasn't promised, and that if you didn't build armor fast, you'd get swallowed by the streets. He didn't want to become a monster. But when monsters are all you see, you stop believing there's another way. His mom tried. She really did. She worked jobs she hated, pulled double shifts, borrowed from family just to keep food on the table. But the problem was, Gifford doesn't care how hard your mom works, it cares who you're with. And Melly? He was loyal, too loyal. From a young age, he was drawn to those who, like him, lived with wounds they never admitted out loud. That's how he met Sackchaser and Juvie. They weren't just friends. They were his reflection, 3 boys from nothing. 3 stories no one cared to hear. 3 hearts trying to beat loud enough to be heard in a world that only saw numbers, records, and mugshots. But there was a difference in Melly. A fire, a chaos that wouldn't stay hidden. Teachers saw it. Officers sensed it. Even his own friends noticed how easily he flipped. One moment laughing, the next completely blank. That switch, that inner fracture, wasn't something he learned. It was something he was born with. People said it was just trauma. But Melly started calling it Melvin. And the music, that was never for fun. It was a weapon, a confession booth. A place to hide the parts of himself he didn't have language for yet. Every bar he spat was soaked in confusion, in guilt, in bravado masking pain. When he rapped, "I got murder on my mind," people called it art. Some called it prophecy, but those closest to him knew it wasn't a song. It was a journal entry. By 16, he was already facing serious charges. But fame doesn't care about your past when your voice moves numbers. His songs took off before the ink on his court papers had dried. Labels fought for him. Lawyers swarmed in. The same adults who once warned him about prison now sat across from him in million-dollar meetings. And Melly, he thought he had made it. He thought he was finally free. But fame didn't fix anything. It magnified everything. Suddenly his crew had entourages. Money started flowing, but so did paranoia. Melly started moving different. He trusted fewer people. He argued more. Even Juvie and Sackchaser noticed the change. One of them texted a friend just weeks before their deaths. Melly acting strange, like he knows something we don't. That message was never meant to be evidence. But it became a clue because something happened in the months before the murders. Melly wasn't just spiraling, he was splitting. Melvin became louder, more present, more uncontrollable. And Melly, he started smiling at the wrong moments. Laughing in silence, pulling away from people he once called brothers. Some say the fame broke him. Some say it was the secrets. Others say Melly made a deal long before the courtroom ever saw him, a deal with himself. That to survive in a world that didn't love him, he had to love no one. not even his day ones. The night Subchaser and Juvie died, something in Melly cracked for good. The state said it was cold, planned, calculated. But those close to him still argue he didn't pull the trigger, not with his hands, maybe with his silence, maybe with his distance, maybe with the voices in his head that told him it was already too late to be saved. But what no one talks about is what happened after. Melly didn't run, he didn't cry, he didn't confess. He went to the studio, he recorded, he smiled. He filmed TikToks, the internet called him demonic. But others saw it for what it really was, a boy trying to pretend the world hadn't just collapsed on top of him. A boy trying to disappear into the only thing that ever gave him control, the performance. And when the cuffs finally closed around his wrists, when the media turned him into a villain, Melly didn't fight it. Because part of him believed he deserved it. But there's more to this story than just guilt or innocence. There's the deal he refused to make, the one that could have saved his freedom if he just gave up someone else. But he wouldn't. He said, if I go down quiet. And that silence, that loyalty, that last decision may be the exact thing that destroyed him forever. The courtroom smelled like old wood and nerves, every seat filled, every camera angle locked. Reporters were whispering like vultures circling before a kill. And in the center of it all, YNW Melly, chained at the wrists, jaw clenched, staring straight ahead like the floor had more answers than the lawyers surrounding him. People said he looked calm, but they didn't see his legs shaking. They didn't hear the way his breath hitched every time someone said the word life. Because for Melly, this wasn't about jail anymore. It was about erasure. About whether the world would remember him as the artist who gave us Murder on My Mind, or the teenager who murdered his friends. The prosecution walked in first, confident, sharp, robotic. They didn't see a person. They saw a product of his own lyrics. They stacked bars against him like bullets, quoting every line like scripture, turning art into confession. But the courtroom didn't gasp. It didn't need to, because the real drama was unfolding behind the scenes. See, what the cameras didn't show was the deal. Yes, that deal. One that was offered quietly, privately. Away from the jury, away from the press, away from the world watching live. It was a hush-hush arrangement that could have changed everything. If Melly gave up one name, one person tied to a larger investigation, he could have walked with reduced charges. Maybe even parole. They slid the offer across the table like a lifeline, but Melly, he didn't even touch it. He didn't ask who else took the deal. He didn't blink when they said, "This is your last chance." He just shook his head and said, "I ain't no snitch." That sentence sealed his fate. And the room knew it, because just 2 days earlier someone else had taken the deal. A name no one expected, one of Melly's inner circle, a man he once shared stages with, slept next to on tour buses, shared secrets with. His former producer. He flipped, quietly, signed his name, walked away free. He gave the state everything they needed, and Melly knew. He felt at the moment the DA's tone changed, the confidence in their walk, the extra smirk during cross-examination. Someone had given them the playbook, someone who knew where the bodies were buried metaphorically and literally. But Melly, he took it. Every accusation, every twisted lyric thrown in his face, every headline that called him a monster. He swallowed it like poison and smiled. Because if there was one thing he wouldn't let them take, it was his loyalty. That smile, though, it didn't last. Because mid-trial, something dropped. A phone call recording. One no one saw coming. It was from Melly from jail talking to someone on the outside, laughing, joking, saying, "They think they got me, but they don't know nothing." The prosecution played it in full. You could feel the air leave the room. It didn't matter that inmates say reckless things all the time. It didn't matter that bravado behind bars is more survival than truth. To the jury, it sounded like confidence. To the jury, it sounded like guilt. But the real twist was that the call wasn't recent. It was old, from months ago, spliced, edited, pulled completely out of context. And someone on Melly's own team had leaked it. For what? A lesser charge? A cleaner sentence? No one knows, but one thing became clear: Melly had been betrayed twice. Once by the system, once by someone who was supposed to ride until the end. And the worst part, he couldn't even name names. Because snitching wasn't in his blood, even if it cost him everything. So when the jury returned, when the verdict was sealed, when the cameras zoomed in on his face as they read the word guilty, Melly didn't shake. He just whispered, "I knew it." He looked at his lawyer, looked at the crowd, looked at the space where his mother used to sit before she stopped coming, looked at the empty row that was supposed to be filled with his friends, his brothers, his believers. They weren't there. They had already moved on. The world had already chosen a villain. And Melly, he was just the final page in a story they had already written before he ever stepped foot in that courtroom. But even as the guards moved to cuff him tighter, even as his name trended again with hashtags filled with flames and snake emojis, even as the fans outside screamed, "Free Melly!" with voices that cracked from pain, there was something they didn't know, something the judge never heard, something buried in the DMs of an anonymous account tied to one of the victim's sisters. A message Melly received the night before the incident. A message that may have proven he wasn't the only one being hunted that night. It surfaced at 3:12 a.m. Not from the court, not from the defense team, not even from the media. It came from a burner Instagram account with 0 followers, no posts, and a profile photo of a black screen. The caption was simple: "Y'all ain't seen this part of the story yet, ask his lawyer why this wasn't shown." Attached was a screenshot of a DM, not doctored, not filtered. Raw, timestamp, the night before the murders, sender. An account linked to the sister of one of the victims, Juvie. Recipient, Melly, and the message: "Watch your back, he already told me what's going down, don't let loyalty get you killed." The screenshot hit the internet like lightning. People didn't know what to make of it at first. Some called it fake. Some said it was bait. But within hours, digital forensics pages confirmed the metadata. It was real, and it wasn't just any warning. It was a death sentence in disguise. Because if what the message hinted at was true, if someone in Melly's circle knew there was a setup in motion, then the entire narrative of what happened that night just shifted. Suddenly, this wasn't just about betrayal. It was about self-preservation, about who struck first, about what Melly might have known but couldn't prove. Back in the courtroom, this DM was never shown. His team either buried it or never got it in time. And when fans demanded answers, all they got was silence. But the streets started talking. People close to the case, friends of friends, exes, cousins, former producers, started leaking more. Threads began popping up everywhere. Discord servers, Reddit forums, TikTok rabbit holes. A new theory took over. Melly didn't kill his brothers, he was trying to survive them. One alleged former crew member anonymously posted, "Y'all don't get it, there was pressure on all sides. Labels, ops, even Juvie had heat on him. Nobody was innocent. That night something snapped, and Melly knew someone was gonna die. Just didn't know who was first." Another text leaked, this time from Sackchaser, sent to an unknown number just 2 days before the murders. "He acting off, got money and forgot where he came from. We might need to check him before he checks us." No one knew what check meant, but after the murders, those words turned deadly. The idea that Melly was the aggressor began to unravel, and in its place, a new possibility. That he was being targeted, that the betrayal didn't start with him but ended with him. Then came the voice note, uploaded to Twitter by a verified journalist who claimed it came from a jailhouse burner phone. The voice. It sounded like Melly, raspy, low, defeated. "If I told y'all what really happened, they'd have to open this whole case again, but I won't, 'cause even now I ain't no rat, but they know what they did. And one day they gone, wish I had snitched." The internet broke in half. Half his fans flooded back, screaming for retrials, launching numbered justice for Melly campaigns, tagging legal influencers, pushing for appeal. The other half, furious. "You should have said it in court. Too late to play victim now. You had your shot and took life instead." But one thing was undeniable, the case was far from clean, and the media, they couldn't ignore it anymore. Headlines changed overnight. Small blue diamond, new leaks suggest possible threat against Melly before incident. Was Melly set up by his own crew? Small blue diamond, the betrayal nobody talked about. Did loyalty kill YNW Melly? Even podcasts began jumping in. One true crime show aired a full breakdown of the DM, text messages, and timeline inconsistencies. At the end, the host whispered, "What if Melly didn't snap? What if he was cornered?" Meanwhile, inside the prison, Melly's world was shrinking. His visitation list, cut in half. People who once begged to talk to him now ghosted him. And his label, they started scrubbing mentions, removing posts, unfollowing his main account. Because the buzz was growing around one more piece of evidence. One final angle no one had touched yet. A USB drive recovered from Melly's backpack the night of his arrest. At first, it was dismissed, just a device full of unreleased tracks. But a new leak claimed something else entirely. There's a recorded conversation on that drive between Melly and someone inside the label, talking about loyalty. Talking about how if something goes down, I'm taking the fall. Was it planted? Was it real? No one knows because the contents of that USB were never submitted as evidence. And when Melly's new appeal attorney was asked why, she paused, swallowed, and said, "Some things get buried because they'd raise more questions than they answer." Now the fans are demanding it all be unsealed. Because if Melly was loyal, if he held secrets that could have set him free, if he stayed quiet while others made deals, walked away, and rebuilt careers, then maybe this wasn't a murder story. Maybe it was a sacrifice, a boy who chose silence over survival. And now, that silence is starting to rot the truth from the inside. It began like all modern storms do, with a post. A single sentence posted to X, formerly Twitter, by an anonymous account claiming to be a cousin of Juvie's ex. Y'all cheering for a killer. He knew what was coming and still let them die. The post didn't go viral because it was true. It went viral because it sounded true. Because at this point, the world wasn't looking for justice. It was looking for someone to blame. And YNW Melly, once the smiling face of SoundCloud stardom, had become the internet's favorite contradiction. Half of social media believed he was the devil. The other half thought he was a martyr. And in between, a wasteland of confused fans, shattered mothers, bloggers dissecting courtroom transcripts, and celebrities who didn't know which side of history they were standing on. Instagram stories lit up with reactions. Trippy Red posted, "Some of y'all forgot who that boy was before the fame. You ain't see what he saw. You ain't live what he lived." Arcade Mix went live. If these DMs are real, then Melly's defense team fumbled the biggest bag in trial history. A-list producers started distancing. No more playlists, no reposts of old songs. Quiet silence turned into calculated erasure. Meanwhile, TikTok flooded with emotional edits of Melly, slow-motion footage of him smiling in old interviews, clips of him holding a mic with fire in his eyes, spliced against headlines that read "Life Without Parole" and "Lost Potential." The audio. His own lyrics echoing back at him like a ghost. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I just got murder on my mind." Under the posts, the comments were split like torn skin. "This is what happens when trauma goes untreated. Stop glamorizing killers. 2 boys are gone. Y'all don't get it. He was trying to protect himself. Then say that in court instead of turning it into a movie." Inside the prison, Melly's access to the internet was cut, but he could feel it. The tension, the abandonment, the noise outside growing louder than the voices in his own head. His lawyer visited less. His commissary ran dry. Even his mom's tone changed, less hopeful, more tired. And then the news hit. Sackchaser's brother was filing a civil suit against Melly's estate. Not just for damages, but for the full rights to Melly's unreleased catalog. The betrayal came full circle. They weren't just locking him up. They were trying to erase everything he had left. His music, his story, his name. Because in the eyes of the world, guilty or not, Melly had become radioactive. The platforms that once boosted his rise began quietly removing him from homepages. Streaming platforms flagged his content. Industry insiders whispered that no label would ever touch a post-prison comeback, because even if Melly beat the case on appeal, he'd already lost the war. He wasn't seen as a man. He was seen as a meme, a cautionary tale, a "what happens when you let demons win?" And the cruelest twist, even his biggest fans started to fracture. Private fan pages debated endlessly. Some said he was failed by the system. Others claimed he failed himself. The arguments turned personal. Some posted screenshots from alleged jail calls that hinted Melly wasn't being fully honest. Others accused those fans of selling out for clout. It got so toxic, several pages shut down completely. But amid all the chaos, one girl posted something different. She wasn't famous, just a fan. Someone who said she met Melly once at a Waffle House after a show. Her post went viral for a different reason. "He looked tired, not famous. Just tired. I told him stay safe. And he said, 'It's too late for that, but thank you anyway.'" No filters, no edits, no hashtags, just a memory of a boy who knew the ending before the story ever started. It happened on a rainy Thursday, gray skies hanging like a curse over the Florida correctional facility where Melly was being held. Nothing unusual at first. Guards rotated. Showers were scheduled. Inmates moved quietly. But just before lights out, something slipped. A guard new to the rotation entered Melly's block with a sealed envelope. No return address. No name, just a label scrawled in uneven ink. "FORM, he handed it off, said nothing. Melly opened it in the dark, the paper damp from humidity. Inside wasn't a letter, it was a photo. Black and white, grainy, clearly taken from a security camera. 2 people in the shot, barely visible, shadows lit only by the weak flicker of hallway light. One of them clearly Melly, but the other. It was the DA from his own trial, and the timestamp, 4 weeks before the sentencing. That moment, captured silently, never mentioned in court, was not supposed to exist. Melly and the DA had no known private meetings, no formal communication, no discovery records showing that encounter. Yet there it was. and written on the back of the photo in smudged pencil, "You weren't supposed to remember this." But I did. No signature, no explanation, just that. The next morning, Melly turned it in, but something was off. The guard who brought it in, gone, transferred, no trace, no paperwork, and then the power flickered. Surveillance in that wing cut out for exactly 32 minutes. Just long enough for Melly to be moved to solitary, not for punishment, not for protection, but for what the warden called a reclassification process. When he emerged, his call privileges were frozen, his legal access cut to 30 minutes a week. His entire case file was seized for investigation. And that's when fans knew something darker was unfolding inside those walls. Because 2 weeks later, another leak appeared, this time from the dark web. A zip file, password protected, the title. Who really ordered it? Inside, encrypted voice memos and redacted affidavits. Hackers said the voice belonged to someone tied to a label executive. Whispers of pressured lyrics, forced conflict, and a chilling line. "We needed him to break. Melly wasn't supposed to walk. He was supposed to crash." And just like that, a new narrative took root. What if Melly wasn't just the product of a bad night? What if he was set up to fall from the beginning, not by his boys, not by rivals, but by people who profited from his pain, who wanted chaos, who staged conflict, who monetized his breakdown? Because here's the real twist. Before his arrest, Melly was preparing to leave his label. Documents surfaced of unsigned termination forms. Private DMs hinted at a secret meeting with an independent manager. He wanted out, control, freedom, and some people, high up, didn't want that. Because Melly wasn't just valuable behind a mic. He was a narrative, the split personality rapper, the tortured genius, the murder on my mind poster boy, and if he left, that narrative collapsed. So maybe, just maybe, they made sure he didn't. Now behind bars, Melly sits in silence. No press, no posts, no songs, just waiting. Because even after a sentencing, even after the verdict, even after the betrayal, this story isn't over. Not until the world knows who handed him that envelope. Not until someone breaks the silence from that hallway camera. Not until the full truth of what happened that night, before the murders, before the trial, before the betrayal, is dragged into the light. But for now, he's just one name behind a locked door, one boy, two bodies, and 1,000 secrets still sealed in shadow. So now you've heard it all, the betrayals, the leaks, the secrets buried behind prison walls, and the one envelope that changed everything. But let's be real for a second. What do you believe? Do you think YNW Melly was a cold-blooded mastermind? Or a pawn used, manipulated, and discarded by people more powerful than we'll ever know? Do you believe the courtroom saw the truth? Or just the version that was easiest to sell? Because right now, somewhere inside a solitary cell, a young man with a name the world once screamed in stadiums is sitting in silence. Not because he's guilty, but because he stayed loyal. And maybe that loyalty cost him everything. But what if that loyalty is also the key to unlocking the real truth? Drop your thoughts in the comments. No holding back. Do you think Melly deserves a second chance should the USB be unsealed? And who do you think sent that photo? What's your theory? This isn't just a case anymore, it's a movement. One that's dividing the internet, reopening old wounds, and shaking the very system that made him a star. And trust me, this isn't the end. There are still recordings we haven't played, people who haven't come forward, one final name that hasn't been mentioned yet. So if you want the next drop, the next twist, the next chapter in the story of YNW Melly, you know what to do. White heavy checkmark smash that like button, white heavy checkmark subscribe with notifications on white heavy checkmark. Share this video with someone who still believes in truth over headlines, because the next video, it's going to expose everything they don't want you to know. And when that truth comes out, it's not just YNW Melly's fate that'll change. It's the entire game. Stay watching, stay questioning, and never let them write the ending for you.